the Madman! Welcome to the top custom Hearthstone cards of the week. Let's jump right into it with a big one to start with. CLS Dark Moon, 5 mana, 2/2, neutral. Whenever you spend mana, add a random Dark Moon fair card to your hand. They range from 1 to 5 mana, 1 mana Dark Moon Despoiler, draw a minion that costs 5 or less from your deck, double its attack, health, and cost. 2 mana, Fortune Telling, reveal the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck, remove any minions revealed. 3 mana, Blastenheimer Blast, recruit a minion and deal its attack as damage to a random enemy. 4 mana, the Strength Tester, after you attack a minion, deal damage to it equal to its attack. And 5 mana, Dark Moon Tonics, double a minion's health, then summon a copy of it. So all in all, it was tough to evaluate this card because there's a lot going on in this one. First of all, whenever you spend mana would be a completely new mechanic. How do you evaluate that? I generally thought of it as, well, you can play a Firefly and a Flame Elemental, and that's an easy and probably common way to activate CLS Dark Moon. And then past that, Silas can also activate himself because you might draw Dark Moon Despoiler or Fortune Telling, which certainly costs low enough that you could cast that, and then therefore you would add another random Dark Moon Fair card to your hand as a result, while also getting the effect. So my head was swimming, I felt like I was drowning in all the mechanics, so for that reason I'm going to give the design on this 3 stars. Feels like it's one of those cases where there's just a little bit too much going on. It's probably the wrong time to introduce, whenever you spend mana, a new mechanic, along with 5 very unique cards. The balance on this one, it is really hard to evaluate the balance, because it's tough to know about how scary getting, say, 4 of these cards is, but I tried to evaluate how strong it would be, assuming that you would get 4 cards and you were to cast this around turn 10, and I compared it with Lyra, and I compared it with Gadgetzan Auctioneer. It's like, you know, a card like this probably could be let through. 5 stars on balance. Ballpark, it looks balanced, roughly. Another problem with the design is the RNG of it, because if you do get a Dark Moon Despoiler in your initial draw, then you can just cast it and then you get another Dark Moon Fair card. All in all, I think that the card would be more okay if instead of whenever you spent mana, you got a card as a Battle Cry or as a Death Rattle or even both. Just to start you off with something a bit more basic. Zandalari Nightstrider. Rogue, 4 mana 4/3 minion with stealth, silence any minion damaged by this minion. Really clear comparison with Spellbreaker. This card you can actually play proactively before your opponent has a Death Rattle, or rather has something that wants to be silenced on the board, including Death Rattles. Seems like a cool idea to have a proactive Spellbreaker and to not give neutral more silence effects. Rogue seems like the type of class that would silence you. They do that in World of Warcraft by kicking you and by interrupting you. Design seems good, right class for 5 stars. Balance, 5 stars. The potential to silence multiple things if you're like hitting eggs with it. That's where the value lies, but otherwise has its pros and cons over Spellbreaker, so interesting design. Zandalari Deathseer, 3 mana 3/2, Death Rattle. The next Death Rattle to trigger this turn triggers twice. I found myself bewildered looking at this card because I was wondering, how in the world do you get this to work? There's a lot of moving parts here in that you have to play the Deathseer and basically kill it that turn in order to get your other Death Rattle card, which is presumably already on the board, to trigger twice. That's just so much work and it seems so specific. Basically have to play this in backstab of 2 health, your opponent will just kill it. When Necron Vial already exists also. For 5 mana, triggers a Death Rattle twice. Triggering a Death Rattle twice means it actually goes thrice, since you can still send in your guy and activate the Death Rattle. So this is like 1 extra Death Rattle. Design, 1 star. I can't figure out a single use for it. And the balance is 1 star, I can't really figure out a single use for it. Lights of the Fire Festival, a 6 mana mage spell. Add a Flame Geyser, Cinderstorm, and Firebolt to your hand. And all minions lose stealth as a part of the flavor of putting on a huge fireworks show. I was struggling a little bit on whether or not I liked the cute all minions lose stealth at the end. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. So this is 6 mana, draw 3 fairly decent cards. Tempo Mage does run Fireball and Cinderstorm, and has been known to run Flame Geyser here and there. And Control Mages don't run any of these 3. Are they better cards than you would have in your deck on average? Probably not. Aluneth exists, which is 6 mana, constantly draw 3, so the card doesn't seem that strong. There's a little bit of danger of getting to a critical tipping point of too much damage, but the counter argument to that is Tempo Mage isn't always running Pyroblast, which is 10 mana, deal 10. And this is like, when you total up all of the mana cost of this, 15 mana to deal 13, so that doesn't seem that scary either. The design is 5 stars, I think. It's got a cool design to it. Clearly a fire festival has a bunch of fire-related spells coming to you. Balance 5 stars. I think it's at the right point, exactly the right mana. 1 mana more than the Nourishes draw 3. These cards aren't really that important to tutor up either because they're generalist cards. They don't really serve any particular purpose. Forsaken Sethrak, 5 mana, 5/3, Divine Shield. Battlecry, if your opponent has a stealth minion, attack it. One of the very few ways to interact with a card with stealth. Currently, just AoE will incidentally damage them, Flare reveals them. But Forsaken Sethrak, if you want to just get in their face with a minion. I mean, obviously, stealth is not a big concern right now. At some point it was with Stealth Gadgets and Auctioneers, which Forsaken Sethrak would have been a really interesting print back in that day. It's weak enough that you wouldn't run it in every deck. 5 mana, 5/3 Divine Shield stat line is okay, reasonable. Strong enough that if stealth were a problem, this would be a clever way to deal with it. Design 5 stars, balance 5 stars. And yes, this is a 5-star balance even though nobody would play it at all because it's kind of intended as a tech card. Probably print this in a set where you're concerned that stealth might be spiraling out of control. Fireworks, a rogue 2 mana spell. Deal 2 damage to a minion. If that kills it, return this to your hand with double damage and cost. So 2, 4, 8, pretty much. Simple enough card to evaluate in the sense that you have to ask yourself, is 2 mana, deal 2, draw a 4 mana, deal 4 card too powerful? And then is 4 mana, deal 4, draw an 8 mana, deal 8 card too powerful? And there's a little bit of precedent in this. Pyros is a 2 mana 2/2, which turns into a 6 mana 6/6, which turns into a 10 mana 10/10. Was that too powerful? No. So is therefore a 2 mana deal 2 into a 4 mana deal 4 into an 8 mana deal 8, all of which are kind of below the curve too powerful? And I would say no. Also no. Design 5 stars, balance 5 stars, I say. Cool little rogue control tool. Another interesting rogue toy, 3 mana 3/4 Snake Oil Vendor. Battlecry, add a snake oil to your hand. Snake Oil, 0 mana, do nothing. It's a scam. Really interesting card in the sense that it'll reward the players who see past the snake oil for doing nothing as actually having value. You gotta squeeze that value out of whatever you can get. And for rogues, of course there's Gadgets and Auctioneer, of course there's Combo. You can use the Snake Oil for both, and I think the Snake Oil Vendor being a 3 mana 3/4 with this minor bonus is just enough to make for a very interesting card. Design 5 stars, balance 5 stars. So roguish. Love it. And to continue the rogue love, let's go with Rift Thief. 4 mana 3/3, Battlecry, add a 0-cost copy of your opponent's hero power to your hand. Basic hero powers, but you can also get the upgraded hero powers, you can also get the Death Knight hero powers, and if you get a passive hero power from a Death Knight, then it reads as a 0-cost, that effect applies for this turn. I like the effect where you're stealing a hero power for basically one-time use, but I just feel like it's a bit weak at the moment, since on average I'm kind of counting the hero powers to do roughly 1 damage, so it's kind of like add a Moonfire to your hand. And yes, Moonfire is useful with Combo and Gadgets and Auctioneers, but it's not quite that strong to justify it. So I think it could even be 3 mana, in which case you would compare it with Blink Fox, and it's like, what if Blink Fox always gave you Moonfire, is the idea to think about here. And would that be great? So design 5 star, balance, I think it's a little weak. I think it could be 3 mana, so 3 star balance. Unsavory Armour. Interesting warrior minion, 3 mana 2/3, Battlecry, give your opponent 6 armor. When their armor breaks, summon a 3/3 scrap golem. I do want to mention that I do have a problem with these persistent effects that still last past the card itself leaving, but I think you could represent this persistent effect by, you know, highlighting their armor with like a red border to indicate that there's a golem a-coming. Something like that. Potentially a 3 mana 5/6 when you add up the unsavory armor plus the scrap golem. It would fit a mid-range warrior type because giving your opponent 6 health is obviously bad, but if you are trading off giving your opponent 6 health for 3/3, that's a really good deal for you. You just have to actually break their armor, which is why this wouldn't fit in a control deck. And an aggro deck would want to kill the opponent really fast, so this 6 armor wouldn't be useful, so it's specifically for a mid-range deck, or like a tempo deck. Dangerous to print a card with such high potential value of a 3 mana 5/6 total stat line. It really would depend on whether or not Warrior got enough aggressive cards to go with it, but it's got an interesting downside and upside. I think it's a cool design. Hard to say if it's too powerful yet, and it would depend on the sets that were out to support it. But for now, design 5 stars, balance 5 stars. Capture Sphere. A priest spell, 2 mana, choose a minion with 1 health, put it into your hand. So you can do it to your minions, you can do it to their minions. Gets around Death Rattle. You can manipulate healths by sending your minion into their minion, setting it to 1, and then capturing it. Cool idea. It's kind of like Holy Water, so it's a very priest mechanic. I like it. Design 5 stars, balance 5 stars. And finally, Sarah, Avatar of Yogg-Saron. 5 mana 5/5, Battle Cry, give your Yogg-Saron hopes, and immune on your turn wherever it is. As a reminder, I'm no longer just rating the design of cards that wouldn't be printed today as poor, because we can imagine what it'd be like to have the card having been printed in Whispers of the Old Gods. Now, that does cause another design issue, which I will dock points for, which is it's a legendary, which relies on you having a legendary in your deck, and that is probably just bad design. And Yogg-Saron can still stop casting if it gets Psychic Screamed or Doomed, but still, control decks that run Yogg-Saron probably would not have room to run this 5 mana 5/5 vanilla creature just to activate their Yogg-Saron. So for all of those problems and the leap of logic that you had to print this card way back in the set where Yogg-Saron wasn't nerfed yet, but pretend that it was actually nerfed, and also it being a legend that can only activate one specific legend, design 1 star, balance 4 stars. It should be buffed a little bit to 5 mana 5/6. It's just give your Yogg-Saron hopes and immune on your turn isn't really worth that much. So a lot of high ratings this time around. Cool cards. Custom Hearthstone going strong.